On today's special Kareem's Quest, I'm going to be talking about Tropical Storm Melissa and everything that you need to know about it and Jamaica. So, in terms of how we need to get ourselves prepared, just some of the key informations that are out there. Now, the first thing that we need to get out of the way is just the basic pattern of the tropical storm. Now, it's moving at around 50 miles per hour and it's slowly moving. So, it's one of those steady moving tropical storms, and it has an elongated eye as well. So they're saying that it's meandering around the Caribbean Sea, and that's a good piece of information. However, what was really important to me was hearing the principal director of the Meteorological Service of Jamaica, Mr. Evan Thompson, just give his take on the whole thing, right? So he's saying that, he's not ruling out the possibility of tropical storm Melissa making landfall in Jamaica. All right. And these are some of the main things. Now, before I get into the main things, let me just carry you through, a breakdown of what like storms are and things like that. So you first basically start with a tropical depression. Once it reaches that stage, it's registered as something that you need to take notice of. Then it turns into a tropical storm. And at that point, you have flash flood warning and everything. And then it becomes a hurricane. Now, once it's a hurricane and it's close to, especially a Caribbean island like Jamaica, then that really means trouble for us. Mr. Evan Thompson stated that some concerns that he was having, just looking at the whole outlook, was the fact that we have been having a lot of rain in Jamaica over the past few weeks. And so, due to this consistent rainfall, Jamaica soil is very moist and can erode easily. All right, so this significantly elevates the risk of landslide and flash flood warning. Now, for persons who know about like Bagua, Gorge, Irish Town, the Junction in Portland, these are all places where it can become very hazardous, even for drivers, commuters, as well as residents. The second thing that he looked at was just some of the other landfall issues. Now, I didn't even know this until I was doing some research that the last hurricane to actually have a landfall in Jamaica was Sandy in 2012. So we have been so blessed. Even Beryl never passed through Jamaica. You get me? Passed along the south coast. It never came on the island. And that is something that as Jamaicans we need to take, major consideration about, because that shows that we are a very blessed island. I mean, we can't manage a hurricane hitting us full force with those strong winds, right? Another thing that was brought to my attention just watching the news and everything like that. I just saw the shelves got empty when it come out to bread. Now, I must tell you, I wish I owned a bakery in times like these, because bread seems to be the first thing that people go for whenever they hear of something imminent like a hurricane or a tropical storm. So needless to say, all the supermarket shelves have been, kind of empty where bread is concerned. And of course, I presume people are also going for other canned stuff like mackerel or sardine or corned beef. And, this kind of is reminiscent to me of Gilbert. We definitely underestimated Gilbert. Now, sometimes people might be saying that, well, the Jamaicans are overreacting. But when it comes on to a threat like a hurricane, it's better to overreact and to be over-prepared than under-prepared. And that was the case for Gilbert. In Gilbert, we were really under-prepared. Even me as a child, I was out there when the eye was passing through. Because it was so calm at that point and we were playing around in the water and, it was a mess because we weren't prepared as a country for it and we underestimated it. And Gilbert was really the biggest thing since Charlie. And then after Gilbert, I believe it was Ivan. Ivan was a real big one for us in terms of just having a impact on the country. So, needless to say, the supermarket shelves are, going and the supermarkets are pretty packed. And the road, though, is quite empty. I was able to go on the road and just see what things are like. And not a lot of traffic is on the road, especially because schools are out. A lot of the schools are being served as refuge centers. All right. The physical preparation, this is something that we have to take into consideration. And I'm just going to break it down in terms of what happens when a hurricane or a major tropical storm is coming to Jamaica, and it's going to affect Jamaica, some of the things that happen. So the supermarket shelf, one, start to get empty and it start to get packed, and you see the panic buying, take place. Schools are usually closed, and especially post COVID, I mean, the online learning has really taken up, a space in our curriculum now where we have to be very mindful of it. I don't know how effective it is, to be frank with you. I mean, I remember in the height of COVID, a lot of students were just, turned off from this online learning. And some students never had, internet in the way that they would want it to use it. So, that was also a major issue. But we endured pretty much like the rest of the world. Jamaica endured, right? So schools are closed down, and like the auditoriums would be, in a state where they're being prepared to be a shelter for many people, especially in low-lying areas, who might be suffering from torrential weather whenever that comes. So that's one of the next things. We have a lot of fruit trees in Jamaica, and unfortunately, many of them are unpruned. So when the winds get strong, some of the branches start to break and fall down, and I'm hoping that many people, as best as possible, try to prune their trees, because they sometimes also fall on electricity lines, and sometimes the power outage that many of us face is not the cause of the Jamaica Public Service, but it's just the cause of the fact that we have trees that are unpruned and they just fall down on the lines. So had that not been the case, some of us would get back a lot of our electricity in the event of a major hurricane. And that has been the case. I mean, I've experienced that on both sides. I've experienced it where, JPS was at fault, and, they were trying to bring back power. And I've experienced when, a tree just drop down or a branch just drop down on the line and break the line. So those are things that start to take concern. Some people start to band down the roof, literally, right? Some people start to put blocks on the zinc roofs just to try and reinforce it, especially, if you're close to those sea areas where the wind can get extremely strong. So those are things that we look out for, especially like even dangerous projectiles. I mean, the last time I really saw dangerous projectiles flying around was Gilbert. I mean, people. Then you had satellite dish, right? What is satellite dish to my younger viewers? It's like, like that Starlink thing that they set up. Yeah, that's that flat. A satellite dish was like 10 times bigger than that. And I mean, once the wind caught that, it would just lift it up and it could carry it to a completely different destination. Same thing for the zinc. The zincs, if they're not nailed down properly, they'll also just lift up and just blow up. So those are some major concerns. You look at the different safety teams that are taking place now. We have the National Work Agency trying to clean out our drain, especially in the corporate area. We have a lot of flooding. So Marcus Garvey Boulevard, that is a very problematic area. The other day when we had some torrential weather, I mean, there were cars that were covered in water, covered up to the door panel and up to the glass, right? So you have those concerns that are there. And these are the things that, the National Work Agency is working double time now. And not just them, but I encourage other people to have some level of civic pride, because we can't just put the blame on everybody else and we are not playing our part. We have to start cleaning out a lot of the drains. And when you look in these drains, you see box screws, you see things that we, the people, put in these drains, not knowing that when it clog it up and the water can't flow freely, then we don't start to have a problem, and we don't start to have a flooding problem. Now, with that being said, I also want the authorities to look into our drainage issues, right? I mean, we have to figure out a way. Where are we carrying all of this water, especially in the corporate area where we're building so many high-rise properties? We have to figure out where are we going to put all of this water, when we have the excess rain that is falling. So in the midst of a tropical storm or hurricane, these things become extremely problematic. Now, if you have a car that has, or a vehicle that has low ground clearance, I would tell you to pick your routes very carefully. Now, I was reading an article where the people of Little London, they are very concerned because they suffer from serious drainage. Now, I've driven through the town of Little London, and I'll tell you, when that water start to just settle, it is impossible. I mean, it's a long stretch to because we have places like Jam West Adventure that's down there. And when I cover these adventure places, as you know, for Kareem's Quest, I have to drive through a lot of these places. And Little London, yes, that is a major issue. So I know the residents there are very concerned. And based on the projection of this tropical storm, it seems like it's going to pass the southern part of the island. So we're looking at places like Kingston, St. Thomas, Clarendon, St. Elizabeth, Manchester, Westmoreland. So all of these parishes, are under intense flash flood warning because they are the ones that might get the hardest hits in terms of the showers. So that was another concern. I was also reading in the where some business people from Fort Maria, they were really concerned as well about their businesses because they have experienced flooding. So these are some of the things that people are kind of worried about. People are trying to figure out, all right, how do I drive around these places? A lot of people going full up the gas tank too, and I must say this though, like my past several experiences of hurricane in Jamaica, we have bounced back very quickly. The manufacturing industry, like the food industry, we're talking about those who do baking and canned goods and everything, they really deploy their workers out in these times. And I've not seen a shutdown. Like the last shutdown I've really seen in this country was probably Gilbert. That's the last shutdown I have seen. I mean, I've not seen any other major shutdown where, you go for like in excess of 7 days without light and in excess of, like 2 weeks without, certain food items. I mean, Ivan was rough. Yes, we did not have a lot. We did not have electricity during Ivan for like, I think about 5 days. Good. But outside of that, it has not been the case. So I must give a lot of, our emergency workers credit for bringing back normalcy in a very fast time. And this was the case during Beryl as well, with the exception of St. Elizabeth, that did not have light for an extended period of time, right? And so I hope that JPS has corrected that issue. And so if those residents who are watching from St. Elizabeth should be going through anything like the last time where we had the inclement weather, I hope that, they can have their power restored in a very short time, because it was rough on a lot of residents in St. Elizabeth for Beryl. I mean, a lot of roofs blew off. But more importantly, I know a lot of people they couldn't even charge their phone. These were just some major issues. And as well as Christiana. I remember going up to Christiana and I did a hike in the cockpit country. And you had to pass Christiana and several lines were down. And, people started to sell charge. Right? I mean, people who had a meat store, that was a major problem. They had to go and get generators and, to keep their fridge functioning. So it can cause a serious effect. All right. So that is one of the areas. Now, you can also look at, issues taking place in the, what you call it now, like the vulnerable areas. You can see evacuations start to take place. Of course, I already touched on schools being closed immediately and just used as refuge. And, JPS also doing preemptive measures to kind of ensure that there is electricity. Now, JPS released a statement saying that we should expect a hike in our electric bill. I did not get to go to the depth of that article, but that's something that concerned me, because we already have a very high electricity bill, and just the average Jamaican, right? So to tack on an additional cost, that is something that concerns me as well as many residents, right? So we want to kind of see how best something like that can be mitigated, because we can't deal with another high electric bill. I mean, especially coming from the summer, where many of us would have to be using fans a lot, and we would have already seen a spike then. And now during the winter time is when most people kind of see a decrease in their electric bill. So I know that people are a bit concerned about that, including myself. Many roads during this period also can become impassable. And we're talking about, let me just get the common ones like Garden Town, Irish Town, you would always have some sort of landslide, right? And in Junction St. Mary, that is another tricky road. I mean, whenever there is torrential weather, I would not tell anybody to drive any of these areas. You also have Bog Walk Gorge, which they would usually close because that gorge, I like residents who live there, I've never witnessed it, but residents who live there will tell you how high that water can get. You know what I mean? Especially over the flat bridge. Like people always ask, I do this really good article and this really good video on flat bridge. And people say, well, why you can't put reels at flat bridge? But they have tried it before. When that water gets very strong, when that rear cover water starts to flow in a very strong manner, it removes everything in its path except flat bridge. So that bridge has to keep its design the way it is. So if you have relatives who are traveling, are traversing the island, you want to speak to them about these things, like know the path that you're going to take. And the alternate path to take is Sligoville. Now, the only challenge with Sligoville is that Sligoville can also have landslides, like, rocks will fall onto the road. And I've driven on Sligoville and see rocks fall onto the road as well. Like, even when you're driving during those periods, you have to drive in the middle of the road. And you have to drive very cautiously in the middle of the road because you don't want to drive so close to any of the hills or any places that have rocks and they just start to fall down on your vehicle. All right. And especially like in that Irish Town area, that's one of those areas. Mavis Bank, those are some of the areas that you want to kind of look out for. Sometimes they do have water lock off, and that is like a lot of times that's post storm though. And that can be because of power outage and it can't, NWC can't operate the pumping stations and the mains have been compromised and, sometimes the water is dirty. So there are cases like those, in terms of what can happen. Now, all of these preparations that you see us taking in Jamaica is largely because of Gilbert. Charlie would have happened so much, earlier in the early 1900s that most Jamaicans, by the time Gilbert hit in 1988, those who would have experienced Charlie many of them would have been dead already. So there was that strong recollection. Anyway, Gilbert woke us up. It woke us up, and you can go to my website, kareemsquest.com. You can read my full article on it. I have videos also on it in terms of, the experiences that people have had with Gilbert. And it's still fresh in the minds of many people. We ate corned beef till we're tired. We eat corned beef and rice because many of us did not have any electricity. So some of us will have to go back outside and just go back to the basics. And you cook corned beef till a week. The good thing about Jamaica is that, well, back then, everybody kind of had a little garden. So you'd have callaloo, you'd have things like okra, you'd have different little things that you could still use. But, I remember just begging a relative and to come, and they would come and they'd bring a little bag with some grocery and we'll make it stretch. And for those foreign viewers who are watching, when we say we make something stretch, it means we'll have to make miracle happen with the food. So if it can only serve, if it was only to serve 2 people, we found a way to make it serve 5 people, right? Just have to band together and make life work. And then the last one that that occurred, which was last year, is Beryl. And Beryl really took a number on us, right? It really definitely took a number on the South Coast more than anything else, right? For those of us who were living in like the corporate area in Kingston and in like St. Ann and the northern parishes, really wasn't affected that badly. But man, the South Coast people, that's why the residents in Little London in Westmoreland are feeling or are sharing the sentiments that they are sharing, because they're saying that, listen, it's going to be a rough period for us. So look out for that one right there. I must say that I'm happy at how strong and resilient we are. A lot of communities come together in times like these. You need a machete, especially when the tree branches fall or so. The men have to come out and start cut up the branches them and, clear the debris from the road if needed. And a lot of communities come together. I must give a lot of us credit, for being able to put differences aside and come together for a greater good. So that is one of them. People might be asking also, well, what are some of the things that we expect the government to do? In times like these, we expect the government to have consistent communication with the public by giving us timely press briefings. And, we have been seeing stuff like that happen in the past, luckily, right? Not every country, and I use COVID as a marker because there were many countries when COVID was occurring, the officials weren't coming out and speaking in a timely manner, but several officials have come out and spoken in a timely manner in terms of some of the things that need to happen, right? And I'm going to get down to that. And one of the main persons that I found that came out and said something based off my research was the Dr. Delroy Frey, and he spoke on behalf of the hospitals of Jamaica, and he was saying that they were ready in the event that there is any major incident in terms of spike in terms of patients coming to the hospital. However, one great concern which a journalist raised to him was, what are we going to do about the lack of beds that we have? Because when you're a patient in a hospital, you usually need a bed, regardless of the injury or whatever it is that you're suffering from, you need a bed. And we have had serious bed shortages in Jamaica. And I was very pleased at the fact that he did not hide from this, because I hate when, the officials want to sound correct all the time. If there's an issue, we just have to address the issue and we have to see how best we can deal with it. So, he said that always having patients waiting in the accident and emergency department for beds. And well, that was the main thing that was brought up to him, right? What will be done in cases like these? And he did acknowledge, and I must give him credit for acknowledging the fact that yes, there is a bed shortage, right? And they're going to have to figure out a way how they're going to deal with that if that is the case. I mean, especially if people get injured. I was reading some news as well that the storm actually caused the death of one person in Haiti. So, incidents like these do occur because, it can be very detrimental for different people and different areas, especially those who are in low-lying areas. It can be extremely, just hazardous for them. So that was one of the things that came out of that discussion. And, something that we all have to be, very mindful of in terms of what can happen in cases like these when constant rain is falling. And, some people also to go out like and play football. I think there was an incident with Beryl where some boys were out playing football. One boy got washed away. The ball went into, I think it was like a gully, and he completely underestimated the strength of the water, went in there and got washed away. There was another case where a couple, they were parked somewhere and the water washed away the vehicle that they were in. So there are incidents where people are underestimating the water. I know sometimes people in the water, sometimes it's just a body of water that's separating you from your lane. And it's hard. I'm not even telling you that I can know how to judge these things myself, because sometimes we make it, but sometimes that's not the case. And it's hard to tell, because the water may look still, but the current may be strong. And a lot of times these things can pull away vehicles and pull away people, and it can lead to fatal outcomes. So watch out for those things. I say this to you while saying this to myself. All right, it's not just even something that, because I've taken chances already, and thank God I'm here to still tell my story. So we have all taken those chances. We have to kind of be as cautious as possible and know when to step away, because sometimes it's just a little path that's separating us from our home. So in all, this is what is happening. I've written an extensive article on it in terms of just what to expect if you're in Jamaica with a hurricane coming and an impending hurricane or an impending tropical storm. What are some of the things that you should be prepared for in cases like these? I know people still want to use candle. I discourage people from using candles because I just think I don't like open flame. I think it's very hazardous. So in times like these, I'll tell people, buy something LED, buy LED lantern, buy LED lamp. I mean, they're very affordable. If you go to many towns, if you go to the towns in Montego Bay, if you go to the towns in Kingston, in many parishes, you can find vendors selling these things. They come in extremely handy. And even the mosquito swatters now have flashlights on them. I still have an old-time radio, a radio cassette player for those of you who still know what those things are. I still have one because listening to the news is very important. I mean, granted, I must say, in times like these, I've not been without power for more than a day. And I've lived in Jamaica all my life, and that is extremely commendable, right? There are times that we have to get down really hard on our Jamaica Public Service Company, but I must say that they deploy their staff really efficiently, especially during the past probably narrow encounters that we have had with hurricanes. They have definitely deployed the people out as quickly as possible to kind of restore power. And I've never had to, be in a case where I did not have power, for more than probably 3 days. There was one though, I don't remember which one it was, but there was one where I did not have power for about 2 days. But we can live with that. There are so many other people who struggling and suffering with so many other things. So not having power for 2-3 days is not, that big of a deal when you look at, the other catastrophe that can happen. So be safe on the road, keep up to date with the Met Office, right? They are releasing information constantly. We also have the ODPEM, and a lot of these places are now on social media, so you can follow up with them. They'll give you their forecast in timely manner. They'll probably give you like 2-3 updates on a daily basis, right? You also have the Jamaica Information Service. They have a lot of information. And as well, you have the local papers. You have the Gleaner, which is doing a fantastic job in terms of doing all island coverage. You have the Jamaica Observer. They're also providing their own coverage. So you have all these tools at your hand, stay up to date. I know I have my diaspora people, they are watching and they want to know whether or not their relatives are safe, We have our loved ones that are still here and they want to know that, are you safe down there, And I always tell people, like, whenever you hear about a hurricane coming, one of the tips I tell people, put everything in the freezer. Put as many things as possible in the freezer and put a big chunk of ice in the freezer. That is something that comes in extremely handy with time. So this was another special Kareem's Quest. I hope that you're enjoying the videos. I'm doing a lot of adventure tours around Jamaica, sharing things with you, sharing beautiful stories with you. I did one with a Rastaman who refused to sell his family land, and instead he built a community attraction on it. Really nice story. Check it out, all right? And less than 50% of the people who watch my videos, probably less than even 30% of the people who watch my videos subscribe. Please subscribe. If you're watching it and you're liking it, subscribe to it, all right? It makes a big difference. And make sure that you go into those settings when you subscribe so that when I come out with a new video, you can see it right away and you can support the channel, support real authentic Jamaican content. As usual, you're always welcome to join the quest.